Hello and welcome to The Purposeful Banker, the leading commercial banking podcast brought to you by Q2, where we discuss the big topics on the minds of today's best bankers. I'm Cheryl Brown. Welcome to the show. Today I have Mary Gilmeister with me on the podcast, and she's here to talk about instant payments and a resource that helps financial institutions navigate the ins and outs of offering instant payments to their customers. Mary's a president of PaymentsFirst, which is formerly known as MACHA. That's a not-for-profit trade association that helps its members maintain compliance, improve operational processes, and mitigate fraud and risk. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for having me.
So you've been in this payments game for a long time, and I know you've been with MACHA/PaymentsFirst for over 30 years, but you also serve on a variety of other boards and committees devoted to payments, right?
Correct. I've served on direct deposit campaigns for MACHA. I also serve as the chair of the Consumer Financial Exploitation Group. And in addition to that, I am on the advisory board for the Faster Payment Council. And I've also helped the state of Wisconsin and the state of Hawaii implement direct deposit programs.
You've seen some new things come along in your career. And so instant payments, this is just the latest of the new things, right?
Correct. It is. And it's a big undertaking. I was involved in the Faster Payments group when it was run by the Federal Reserve Bank and participated on that for a couple of years before we actually got instant payments up and running.
So awesome. Well, so tell me a little bit about PaymentsFirst. I know that there was a merger, I think, was it late last year? So you were called MACHA.
Right. So we actually merged effective January 1 of 2025. We combined MACHA and PaymentsFirst together, and we kept the PaymentsFirst name because payments is what we are all about. We're a membership organization, and we provide support and rules interpretation and education for our members. And we also have a for-profit subsidiary called PAR, Payments Advisory Resource, which we do over 650 risk assessments and audits in a year.
Great. Well, how many financial institutions do you have as part of the PaymentsFirst membership?
Over 1,000 financial institutions as members. We also have third-party senders, we have fintechs, we have processors, correspondent banking. So we have a variety of membership that we work with.
And I assume that's all across the United States.
We are in many states. We service Wisconsin, Maryland, and we also service Hawaii. We also have South Carolina, Atlanta, and Georgia. We have Tennessee. And we also have Alabama.
So, like I said before, suffice it to say, you've seen a lot of transformation in the payments industry over the years. And now we have instant payments through RTP and FedNow, which is the first new rail, I guess, in your career, maybe. How have you all at PaymentsFirst approached instant payments, and how do you support your members in understanding this rail?
One of the very first things is when instant payments came about, our board of directors said, we who are made out of financial institutions and industry experts said, we have to figure out how to help our members. So we created a Faster Payments Committee that is now actually over 150 institutions can participate. We meet quarterly, and then we divide into subgroups that are working on different things and try to put together information, best practices, and share a lot of, what they're experiencing. In addition to that, we do offer the accreditation for instant payments, faster payments through MACHA. So we provide training. And in addition to that, we also hold webinars on how to implement FedNow. One of the other things that we also do is we have conferences throughout our territory in which we use Debbie Smart from Q2 as one of our excellent speakers and knowledgeable. We love Debbie. Our members love Debbie to keep them informed as to what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, Debbie's, she's one of those people that if I have a payments question, I'm asking Debbie. She's going to be the one who knows. So you guys have put together, you call it the Instant Payments Cookbook. And this is a resource that you guys have put together and it's not just Payments First, right? There was a collaboration. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But tell me, what is the Instant Payments Cookbook? What is that?
So we know that financial institutions have challenges and there were so many moving parts. What do you need to do to start? Where do you need to start? What are all these? It's new terminology. We're dealing with ISO 20022, which is a new concept with a lot of new information. So we did actually, with our Faster Payments Committee, we actually did one-on-one interviews, a small group of us did, and said, what do you need to know? And we developed use cases that actually were very beneficial to our members, that they could use that use case and then implement it. So we have legal, you have compliance, all the regulations. There's not just one place to go, like with the ACH network, where you have the MACHA rules. You have RTP, you have FedNow, and they're not interoperable. So you have a lot of work to do on explaining when they're similar, when they're different. We also have a lot of technology questions, what to ask your vendor. And one of the neat things that we did put in there was FI Insights. So it was with a financial institution who said, this really isn't anywhere, but here's what you need to ask, and here's what we learn. When you receive, you can't do a request for payment. So when you're in the receive only mode. So those were little tidbits throughout the book that we actually have created that add the insights.
Thanks to Debbie. I've actually had a primer on instant payments for a couple of years now. And it's like, even just understanding the ecosystem of all of the players that have to take part. It's not, hey, hook your financial institution up to this rail and go. There are steps in the process, right? There's an ecosystem that has to be understood. I mean, does the cookbook go to that? I mean, does it start at that level? It's like, here's what the ecosystem is, and then we go down from there.
Yes, it definitely does. We define all the players, who they are, what role do they play in the ecosystem of instant payments. And when we created the cookbook, we included every party so that everybody had an input as to, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to ask your vendor. Here's what you need to ask your correspondent bank. I mean, liquidity and settlement is 24/7, 365. You got to be prepared and know what reports to look at or what reports are available to you. So we cover all of that. We have resources. We have links to the RTP rules. We have links to the regulatory operating circular A, so that if you wanted all of that detail, it is available to you.
Awesome.
And of course, the cookbook wouldn't be a cookbook without recipes.
Yeah, that was my next question. It's like, so what do we have recipes for in there? Is that how you guys are referencing maybe like the use cases?
Correct. And we actually, the actual recipes start you out, like you have a morning breakfast or a morning drink, and it goes throughout the day as you grow your instant payment system. Here are some recipes from all of our different areas. And it just adds some excitement or light reading and fun to a manual.
Well, one thing that we have really focused on, or a value prop that we've identified here at Q2 for instant payments, is really the ability for that invoice information or that payment information to travel on the rail with the payment, so that you don't have to have this separate email invoice or this separate postal mail invoice. Do you guys go into some of the value props in your cookbook like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We definitely do. And for example, my institution at first didn't offer instant payments. So I went and opened up an account at one of our members that did. So we could get that information, and we explain that in the cookbook as to here's what you need to get, here's what could be included. We get into also fraud tools and accept without posting, and what does that mean, and communicating back that we're not going to give this, your account holder immediate credit because we're going to do some more research for it. So all of that's included. We have actually, since this publication, we've also developed quick reference cards for instant payments. So you don't have to page through all that information. It's shortened, and we provide a sample authorization form to say, I didn't authorize this to come out of my account, or I want to refuse this credit. We've created forms that our members have used in instant payments, so it's readily available to them.
So that's awesome. It's not just a manual, but you have these actual on-the-job tools that someone can just keep at their desk and quick reference. That's wonderful. Well, we talked a little bit earlier about the collaboration, and there's a long list of collaborators that went into creating the cookbook. What was that like? And can you just talk a little bit about the collaboration process that you guys use?
So we asked for volunteers, and we developed the outline of the book, and having, for example, a smaller credit union, a very large financial institution that, said, here's all the rich data you have and what you can get. And just the exchange of information, we had OPN. They were instrumental in saying, here's what you need to do, even before you get started, right? You need to ask the vendor all these questions. Settlement was another issue. How are you settling? And if you're on both rails, which, we recommended, that you have to know how that works, what type of reports. And you need to involve everybody in your financial institution. So even the smaller institutions, we created questions that your account holders might have when they walk up to the teller window and say, they're not going to say instant payments, but, they're going to say, how can I get this money quicker, right? Or we really worked through. It was really, really a good group to put all this information in it. And our staff, they actually worked on gathering all the information from everybody and putting it into a format that was a very easy read, but a lot of great information. Because I think in the beginning, everybody thought instant payments was a product versus the FedNow and RTP. They're not a product. It's a rail that you're moving money on.
Right. And, we think that instant payments, the use of the rail is going to pick up more once more businesses understand what it can mean for their organization, how it can, there's that value prop that we talked about earlier about the information moving, but also just like true real-time payments, really getting the money into the bank faster. We think that starts with education. Like there's going to need to be education on the part of the financial institution to educate their customers. And I assume that the cookbook kind of gives some tips and tricks about how best to do that.
It does. And we give you examples of what are the benefits of instant payments. And we even went to as far as developing a use case for a financial institution to do their loan collections, their delinquent loan collections, that you can automatically debit their account and don't have to worry about, you're having that money credited and it works. So they looked at that use case. We've looked at expense reports for employees and paying off their expenses immediately if they have credit cards or whatever the case may be. So we have a full range of use cases as a reference, and then how to implement that. what do you need to do? We have pictures of a phones and what your phone app might look like. So if I want to offer instant payments through a mobile app, we have pictures of what that mobile app will look like. So we get into that far detail with that.
What kind of response have you gotten from the members who have used are you getting some feedback from them?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the committee actually said, I wish I would have had this to implement it. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback. Our members have said this is just a great wealth of information. And quite a few of our members, as we know, are in receive only mode. And so they're like, this is really helpful for me to go to the next step. And we talk about strategic planning, informing your board, how to inform your board. And we do a lot with the board reports too, that you have to have policies and procedures. And we have sample policies that your board or a committee of your board should actually approve.
So it sounds like it's really a soup to nuts resource.
We have a couple of pages where you can just download the resources, and the forms are in a Word document that you can actually adjust to your financial institution and how you want to word it.
Yeah, I know when Debbie found out about the cookbook, she said, Cheryl, we've got to get this out. We've got to help get it out to everybody we can. Let's get them on the podcast. Because, we've written a couple of white papers, a couple of resources on how to get started with instant payments, but we were never going to get to this depth. And so Debbie was adamant. She's like, we've got to spread it far and wide and just get it to as many people as we can. So who needs to read this?
I think you need to have a committee that you developed within your institution, and the whole committee, you have marketing, because we have marketing chips in there. You need your legal and your compliance. You need the frontline people who are or your call center people, and definitely operations. And there's a difference because there is no day two of operations, right? It's not like ACH where you get in a transaction and then you have to deal with it and return it the next day if it's not postable. So there's a lot of opportunity, and you really need to put together a committee and have them each pass that around for each one to read or read their certain area, because they're going to have to understand it from the very beginning as well. They're going to have to explain it to the board. You're going to have to explain it to your executive team and bring in operations and frontline. This is it took us a while to get even direct deposit going. And so I think we need to really get everybody involved. And I think now with the executive summary from President Trump about Treasury checks and all the fraud that is in Treasury checks and all checks, actually, including businesses, you're going to want to know that payment is there and that you have availability to use those funds immediately. And I think that's going to be a turning stone for instant payments. And we look at disasters of the Maui fires, or North Carolina had the hurricanes, and people need those funds immediately. And I think, the federal government said, we're going to go to instant payments. We're going to go to quicker payments and do away with checks and all the check fraud that is currently happening today. So this allows you to start to get on board, and we will continue to work with our members on developing more fraud tools, what's available, policies and procedures, and education of materials. So it's going to evolve, but you need to start from somewhere, but it's going to happen.
And you mentioned fraud and check fraud, and it's something that we just talked about on our very last podcast, is how check fraud is still so high. And who's using checks? Well, it's businesses, right? Consumers aren't using checks unless they have to pay a business for using checks. But I think one of the things that we've heard from many financial institutions is this concern about fraud because it is an instant payment. And what do we do? And so do you guys have a section in the cookbook about fraud?
We do. And what tools are available. And with RTP and FedNow, there are different things that you have to do to report that fraud. It's very, very minimal. And we talk about you have to set exposure limits and you have to not give it to every customer that comes around. You're going to want to make sure that you have your controls in place. You're monitoring your file limits. You don't want to give everybody $1 million to have access. So we do address all of those areas within the actual toolkit. And then we also have a little bit of a risk assessment. What do you do to address the risk? Here are some questions, broad questions of you need to figure this out. So ask this question, rate this, do cross-channel risk. So we do include a little bit of a risk assessment in there as well.
Once again, those good tangible tools that people can take back to their financial institution. And you mentioned small institutions and you mentioned big institutions. Is this cookbook applicable for like the smallest credit union all the way up to a top 10 bank?
It is. I mean, we had Wintrust, which was their larger financial institution, and we had a smaller credit union. And they even brought up the fact of you need to ask, when you're processing these transactions, because sometimes credit unions use the same number. So how are you going to work around that? So we addressed it on all scales as to what you need to be doing.
Well, this sounds like a great resource, Mary. And I appreciate, you coming on to talk a little bit about it. I also appreciate that PaymentsFirst is offering the Instant Payments Cookbook to our podcast listeners at a discount. So if you click the link in the show notes and you use promo code Q22025, that's Q2 2025, you can get the cookbook for $200, which is $50 off the already discounted member price. So listeners, if you or someone in your financial institution has been tasked with digging in and understanding instant payments and what it means for your organization and your customers, this is where you're going to find answers. So, Mary, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. And get instant payments.
Yeah. Get on board and start sending, right?
Exactly.
Well, that's it for another episode of The Purposeful Banker. Just a reminder to our listeners to go to q2.com/pod survey and give us your thoughts on our podcast content. Your input is so valuable to help us know that we're giving you the conversations and the content that you will find valuable. The link is in the show notes as well. And as always, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. And you can see our archive of podcasts at hub.q2.com/podcasts. Until next time, this is Cheryl Brown, and you've been listening to The Purposeful Banker.